All right, and good morning, and welcome to a very, very special edition of Truth to Power. I'm your host, Darwin Griffin, and just wanted to let you know that we are streaming live today from Highland Park, Michigan, and we have a very, very special guest in our studio today, and he is the prosecutor for Washtenaw County. And he is currently a candidate for Attorney General here in the great state of Michigan. And we want to kind of give you an opportunity to get acquainted with who Prosecutor Ellie Savitt is in Washtenaw County. But as always, we have to have someone here on this journey that is very eloquent, very beautiful, and very informed about the goings on here in the great city of Highland Park, Detroit, and the surrounding communities. And that is none other than the Honorable Alexis Ramsey. So, Alexis, we welcome you as the phenomenal co-host with me on this journey for a special edition of Truth to Power. And we are going to really delve deep. We are very, very honored to have Prosecutor Savitt on with us for the full 2 hours of this show. So I think that if there are people that want to get acquainted with who he is, what he does, and how he is impacting so many people in Washtenaw County, as well as what he will do, in what he's doing in the state of Michigan. So again, Prosecutor Savitt, welcome to a special edition of Truth to Power today.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
And first, let's ask you primarily, the one thing I had to do more than anything else was to make sure I said your first name right. So, I see in terms of you spelled E-L-I, and I think the first thing that I'm thinking about is saying Ellie, but thinking Eli, Ellie, because my name gets butchered all the time too. People say Darwin, Daryl, Darren.
Yep.
It's back to the old Bewitched days, back when the mother could never get his name right, Darren Stevens, but would say everything other than. So again, Prosecutor
Ellie Savitt. It's
Ellie Savitt.
It's pronounced
before people forget this show, before anything else, they're going to make sure they got your first name right. That's one thing for certain.
Well, but you know what I always say is it's pronounced Ellie, but it's spelled Eli.
Okay.
My parents made that choice. My mother brought me into the world. She gets to choose how my name is spelled and pronounced. But
so you had no choice in the matter.
I had no choice in the matter. Right. But you know what? I'm grateful for them bringing me into the world. So you go with it, right? But what I tell people is, look, it is spelled Eli. And what it means is if you hear about a prosecutor from Washtenaw County whose name is Eli, or somebody running for Attorney General whose name is Eli, that's me too, as long as people are saying nice things about that person.
Well, that's what counts right there. But talk about, who is Ellie Savitt?
Well, I'll just tell you a little bit about my background and, sort of what brought me to this work. I grew up in Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County, where I'm currently the prosecutor. I always like to say that I did not go to school at the University of Michigan for undergrad. I say that to Spartan fans a lot, and we're taping this. I know when there's a big basketball game.
You got that right, and I'm a Spartan.
And I'm a Spartan.
Okay,
so you got two Spartans here.
I'm outnumbered on game day. You guys did this on purpose, I assume. But look, to my two Spartan friends, don't worry, we can be friends anyway, because I did not go to the University of Michigan for undergrad.
Okay.
Now, it's not that I didn't want to. University of Michigan and I had a philosophical disagreement coming out of high school. I thought I was a college basketball player. The University of Michigan had no need for a 6'4" center that can't jump. So I went over to Kalamazoo College on the west side of the state, small college, played 4 years of college ball there. Great experience, enjoyed it a lot. I started my career actually before I was a lawyer. I was a public school teacher. I taught 8th grade special education and general education, U.S. history classes, then did go to the University of Michigan for law school. I had the tremendous opportunity early in my career to work on the U.S. Supreme Court under the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And after I did that in Washington, D.C., I just wanted to come home. I decided to come home. My heart was always here in Michigan. And so I accepted a job actually at the city of Detroit. I was senior legal counsel there. among other things, led our public interest litigation work, sued the opioid industry. We were the first city in the state to do so. Recovered $50 million and counting for the city to remediate the opioid epidemic as a result. One of the things I'm most proud to have worked on in my career is the right to literacy lawsuit on behalf of Detroit school children, where we challenged the state takeovers, the emergency manager laws that had really decimated the Detroit public schools. And we were able to get a good decision out of the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit and recover nearly $100 million, which is currently being reinvested in DPS-CD for things like literacy coaches and literacy instruction. So that was the work I was doing in Detroit. Would love to talk more about that, but decided to run for county prosecutor in Washtenaw County,
Yes.
where I was born and raised. Was elected in 2020, was reelected last year, and I'm proud of the work that we do in that office. My philosophy on prosecution is we should be doing what we need to do to make the community safer and to promote rehabilitation. And sometimes those seem to be at odds with each other, but I can tell you in Washtenaw County, they're not. Now, we treat serious crime seriously, like everybody would expect. We've got dedicated units for domestic violence and sexual assault for the first time now in the Washtenaw County Prosecutor's Office, because those cases need to be handled by trauma-informed prosecutors from start to finish. But we also promote rehabilitative programming. There's so many people that come through our system who don't need jail, don't need prison, and may not even need a criminal record. They need help, they need treatment, they need a plan to get back on the right track. And if we can do that successfully, then we've done our job. So we started diversion programs, including pre-plea, where you never even have to plead guilty to a crime if you do everything right. Get substance use treatment, mental health treatment. We've had people that have lost a loved one unexpectedly and need grief counseling. You do all of that right, and you don't get accused of a new offense. We drop the charges entirely after 6 months. And you never have to check that box that even says you pleaded guilty
Oh, that's phenomenal.
to a crime. And what's even more phenomenal is it works. We had an independent study done of this program. We've had over 200 people go through it, so a good sample size. Right? 90% plus successfully completed it. And of those that successfully completed it, not a single one had been rearrested. Not one.
Yes.
So my philosophy on criminal justice is that we can be rehabilitative and promote public safety at the same time. In fact, I see those two as married to one another. Because if we're rehabilitative, we're keeping the community safe in the long term, and we got the data to prove it in Washtenaw County. So that's a little bit about my background. I'm happy to talk about a number of other things too, but I don't want to go on and on and on. I'd rather have a
No,
conversation.
we want to hear more. Absolutely.
Well, one thing I want to do, because see, that's why I've got, the Honorable Alexis Ramsey here, because of all the work she does, especially like, having been the president of the school board here in Highland Park. But Alexis, and then I know Alexis did a lot of work when it came down to the emergency manager that was representing, Highland Park as well. So Alexis, I'll let you.
Well, my question is, what made you jump into the race to want to run for AG?
Sure. So, I will tell you that I'm a glutton for punishment because I read every page of Project 2025. And when Trump won the election in 2024, I was shell-shocked. I was in mourning, like a lot of people were. And I took sort of a week. And then having read Project 2025, understanding what was coming, and realizing that what Project 2025 really is a legal blueprint for destroying the things that I care about, and so many of us care about in this country: civil rights,
Yes.
workers' rights, consumer protection, environmental protection. I thought to myself, okay, we read about these moments in history, and we always think, what would I have been doing at the time? And I knew that I did not want to be sitting on the sidelines or looking back in 20 years on the wreckage of American democracy, saying, I think I could have done more. So I started thinking about, how can I best serve? How can I
Absolutely.
best be in this fight? And I'm not going to look. You'll probably have politicians that come on here and will lie and say, oh, it didn't even occur to me before this happened. I'm not gonna say that, right? I mean, like, I ran for prosecutor. People are like, oh, have you thought about attorney general? It's a job that I've had interest in, right? If
Right.
you're in government and in public service as a lawyer, it's a job that would
It's a
interest you.
top job, right?
Yeah. But I really started thinking about it seriously then, thinking how I could best serve, knowing Dana Nessel was term limited. And I started thinking, okay, what do I want to see in the next attorney general? What qualities and experience do I want the next Attorney General to have? And I said, well, I think it should be somebody that is familiar with the federal court system.
Yes.
And I worked inside the U.S. Supreme Court, and I've done federal litigation because so much of the litigation is happening right now by state AGs against Donald Trump and his administration happens in federal court. It all happens in federal court. It should be somebody with civil rights experience. And, I mentioned the right to literacy lawsuit. I've done voting rights cases on behalf of the ACLU, right? So check. It should be somebody that knows about consumer and worker protection. We've got the only unit in the state, in the prosecutor's office in Washington County, that focuses on consumer and worker protection. It should be somebody that has an environmental background, because we know that the Trump administration is going to pull back on environmental regulations and leave communities at risk.
Yes.
And I've actually, in addition to the work that I mentioned at the outset, I've been a practicing environmental lawyer and have represented states, including New Jersey, Maryland, and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, in lawsuits against corporate polluters. So I really started thinking about that, and I thought, I think that the best way I can serve right now, given my background, given my experience, given what I can bring to the table, is to run for this position, because again, I don't want to look back at the embers of what we once had in this country and have regret and feel like I could have done more.
Absolutely.
So that's why I decided to do it.
Absolutely. That's great. Great.
Well, and the thing that I just want to ask you too is that when you talk about the work that you've done, you mentioned about doing the work with the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Talk about that. Talk about how that felt to work with her.
It was a tremendous honor, and she was a legal hero of mine before I ever got the opportunity to meet her, much less to work for her. And I'll mention that she wasn't just a legal hero of mine because of her opinions on the Supreme Court. She was a lawyer who was just a brilliant strategist. As a lawyer, she led the strategy to enshrine sex equality and women's rights into the
Yes, she
Constitution
did.
and get that recognized under the 14th Amendment by the court. Now, here's the interesting thing, right? She was a woman at a time there were not very many female lawyers, at a time that there were very few female lawyers certainly practicing and arguing before the U.S. Supreme Court, which is the body that she needed to make her case to in order to get sex equality recognized. And the Supreme Court at the time was 9 men,
Yes.
right? And how do you convince 9 men who have had all the advantages of a system that disadvantages women, that stereotypes women? How do you get 9 men to recognize that sex equality needs to be constitutionally protected? And so what did she do? She found the cases where unequal treatment in the law between men and women based on sex stereotypes disadvantaged men. I'll give you an example. There's an Oklahoma law which said that young women could buy beer at the age of 18, but young men had to wait till they were 21. The stereotype there being, young women are more responsible than young men. But she brought that case up to the Supreme Court, right? And it resonates with the justices because they're thinking, well, gosh, that's not fair, right? But for these young men's sex, they'd be able to enjoy a beer at the age of 19 or 20, right? And so that was her strategic brilliance, is knowing her audience, right? Knowing the types of arguments that were going to resonate with them. And ultimately, her project was successful. And the reason that sex discrimination is seen as suspect under the 14th Amendment now by the government is because of that strategy, because she was a brilliant litigator. So I learned so much from her. And it's a tremendous honor to be in the U.S. Supreme Court and learning under her. But the one thing, above all, that I've always took away from that experience is she was somebody, by the time that I worked for her, this was 2014, 2015, and the notorious RBG phenomenon was in full effect, which was a weird thing. 'Cause I go out for Halloween in Washington, D.C., and everybody's dressed as my boss, which is a weird thing. But she'd been on the U.S. Supreme Court, and before that, the Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. for decades at that point. And when you're up at the appellate level and the Supreme Court level, you're not seeing the individuals that the cases are about. You are reading briefs that are filed on paper. You have arguments that are focused on the law by fancy lawyers in front of the Supreme Court. But she never forgot just how impactful everything that the court did and the justice system did is for individual people. I remember one time, she was a night owl. She would stay up until 4 or 5 in the morning sometimes. And if you were working with her on a case, you were staying there till 4 or 5 in the morning too. And one time, she and I were the only two people left in the building. She had asked me for something. It was decently late on a Friday night. Asked me for a memo on a case that I was working on. And I finished up the memo, and I took it into her office, and I laid it on her desk. And she was working on another case entirely, right? Which was actually, justices have multiple clerks, and one of my co-clerks was helping her with that. It wasn't even my case. But she takes my memo, she puts it aside, and she just starts talking to me not about the legal issues in the case, but about the individuals. And it was actually an immigration case. It's one that probably nobody has ever heard of. It was not a major headline-grabbing case. But she started talking to me about the person and how unfair what would potentially happen to him was, and think about his family and the cascading impact on this individual's life. And she never, ever lost sight of the fact that in our justice system, whether it's a criminal case, an immigration case, a child custody case, a landlord-tenant case where somebody is potentially losing their home, what the courts are doing is potentially the most impactful thing that may happen in the lives of the people that are before them. And that's something I've just always tried to carry with me throughout my legal career. Every single case is the most important thing in at least somebody's life.
Well, one other question I want to ask you too is back to the Supreme Court. Now, there's 9 members on the Supreme Court, and looking at the 9 members, and then there's been a lot of talk about the possibility that they may want to try and expand the Supreme Court to 13 justices, and then also that the justices are there for life. What's your thoughts on that?
The best reform for the Supreme Court that I have heard is to give every justice one 18-year term. And at the end of your 18-year term, you can be a special visiting federal judge elsewhere, but you're not going to be an active member of the Supreme Court anymore, or you can retire and go travel or whatever. And the reason that I like that is because the way that the Supreme Court is set up right now is the composition of the Supreme Court is just totally dependent on who dies or who retires during which president's term. By way of example, my old boss tragically passed away just less than 2 months before the 2020 presidential election, which meant that Donald Trump was able to fill her seat with Amy Coney Barrett rather than the president that we elected in 2020, Joe Biden, being able to fill her seat. And that marked a tremendous shift of power on the U.S. Supreme Court. Are the lives of Americans, of hundreds of millions of Americans, shouldn't be dependent on whether somebody who's 80 plus years old can survive the latest health scare and make it into a new presidential term. That's just arbitrary. And the thing that I like about one 18-year term for justices is it means that every president would get one appointment per term.
Per term.
Right? And so I'm electing this president, it's going to come with a Supreme Court pick. And there wouldn't be an incentive like we're seeing now to just appoint somebody that's like 30 years old and just graduated from law school, because you're thinking, well, they may have 60 years on the court, right? You can pick somebody with a track record that is well qualified, that we know where they stand, right? They'll have 18 years. That's long enough time to certainly leave your mark on the United States of America and have a judicial legacy. And it's also short enough that you're out after that. A new president can pick a term, can pick a justice, and that just seems to me to be a much fairer way of doing things than the really sort of arbitrary system that we have now, that's dependent on just the health of the elderly people.
Exactly. And we got to take a quick break. So let's we'll get back to that in a second. So you are watching a very special edition of Truth to Power with Washington prosecutor Elie Savitt and Alexis Ramsey, the Honorable Alexis Ramsey. So we will be right back.
Watch WHPR and TV33 when you want, where you want, how you want. WHPR is now in your pocket. Download our free app by going to the App Store or Google Play and enter WHPR TV in the search engine. And there we are. You can download WHPR TV or radio. You heard about it. Now come be a part of it. Roku Detroit Worldwide. Approximately 8 million viewers.
Feel good about your future with tuition-free programs at Wayne County Community College District. Whether you want to be in healthcare, computer science, the culinary arts, digital media, or robotics and automation for the next generation of vehicles, WCCCD has you covered. A full range of programs to achieve your goals, fit your schedule, and give you all the support you need to be successful. All of it tuition-free. Now there's something to feel good about. Register today at wcccd.edu.
TV33 is moving to WHPS TV channel 15.2. Make sure to rescan the channels on your TV. Then go to WHPS channel 15.2 to pick up TV33 and all of your favorite shows. The move is on, and we want you to move with us to WHPS channel 15.2. Have you ever wanted your own TV show? Have you dreamed of showcasing your talent for the world to see? Well, now you can. Have your own TV show. You can have your own 30-minute show. Not only will you be seen in the Detroit area, but you can be viewed worldwide. For more information, call 313-868-6612. Visit our studios and receive a free TV interview to promote your business, church, or organization by appointment only.
313watkins.com. Streaming on Roku.
Back, and you are watching a very special edition of Truth to Power. I'm your host, Darwin Griffin, and along me with this journey is the Honorable Alexis Ramsey, and we are joined today for the next hour and a half with prosecutor of Washtenaw County, Mr. Elie Savitt. Before we took the break, Prosecutor Savitt, we were just talking a little bit about the Supreme Court and looking at the possibility of expanding the Supreme Court to 13 justices as opposed to having the 9 that are on there now. But I do want to ask you too, looking at some of the Supreme Court justices, I'm going to kind of delve 2 questions in that. Of the Supreme Court justices, was there any that you really may have, I don't want to say that was a hero to you, besides naturally Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but was there any other Supreme Court justice, current or previous, that you really may have, respected, other than the rest?
Sure, and I'll give a few, starting with the earliest one, Thurgood Marshall.
Yes.
For really many of the same reasons that I admire and revere Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the same is true with Thurgood Marshall. I mentioned Justice Ginsburg's strategic brilliance in litigating sex equality cases in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. And she herself would say this, that she was following in the footsteps of Thurgood Marshall, who was in a very similar position, right? Trying to litigate against the evils of segregation in the U.S. Supreme Court, which at the time was made up entirely of not just men, but white men, right? And he took a similar path, which Justice Ginsburg took as her inspiration with sex equality cases, in the race equality cases. He focused first on schools, right? Culminating in Brown versus Board of Education, because he knew that education was something that was going to resonate far more than public accommodations, right, and other forms of segregation, because it's kids, right? So he started it with higher education and went down to K through 12, law schools, in fact, because he knew that was something that was resonate with justices who were law school graduates. Again, it's knowing your audience, even when you're up against the odds. And of course, poetically, Justice Thurgood Marshall became the first black justice to sit on the U.S. Supreme Court. And in fact, when Justice Ginsburg got to the Supreme Court, you have your sort of pick of chambers. And she very intentionally said, I want to be in Thurgood Marshall's old chambers. And you went in to her private office. She had a gigantic portrait of Justice Marshall, who she took inspiration from. And it's always been something that I've tremendously admired. Other justices that I had an opportunity to know, I'm going to give one that she was also my boss. I clerked for both Justice Ginsburg and
Sandra Day
retired
O'Connor.
Justice Sandra Day O'Connor.
Doing my research, I researched that, so go ahead.
And Justice O'Connor, look, she was a Republican appointee. But she was somebody who really understood how to make people feel at ease and understood that the law needs to have legitimacy in order for people to follow it. Now, I don't agree with all of Justice O'Connor's decisions, right? I'm much more closely aligned with Justice Ginsburg in terms of how I view the law and jurisprudence. But she was a moderating voice on the court and understood that the law really can't go too far. It can't get too far out there because people really need to respect the law. And if they think that the Supreme Court is illegitimate, then we've lost a lot in this country. And that was her sort of moderating voice, which allowed her to be one of the leading forces behind upholding Roe versus Wade until, of course, it was overturned in 2022. But I think that's something that we really miss on the conservative side of things right now.
Yes.
Is those moderating voices, the understanding that this is not a war of attrition in this country. We all live here, and we shouldn't just be making decisions for the 50% of people that agree with you ideologically. We all are together in this country, and the law needs to have legitimacy for all of us. And the last person I'll mention I had the tremendous opportunity to get to know a little bit and to meet was Justice Sotomayor, who I think is just a vision of moral clarity at the Supreme Court. She always would tell it like it is. She is not afraid to be somebody that will dissent alone. And I respect, there's a number of justices that I respect a lot, respect their strategic brilliance and their negotiating skills. Justice Elena Kagan is somebody who's in that model. But it's important to have a voice like Justice Sotomayor's on the court, who is just going to call things out when they are wrong and potentially lay the groundwork well into the future for a court to revisit erroneous decisions. And most recently, the justice that has really followed in that mold is Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who's issued a number of, I think, really powerful dissenting opinions from what this court has been doing, especially with respect to this administration. So those are some that I really admire.
So do you think, and I'm going to let you ask your next question, Alexis, but do you think then that it should be expanded to 13 justices?
Here's my honest answer. I think it should be expanded to 13 justices if the Democrats are in power and the Democrats are going to be able to confirm 4 new justices.
Absolutely.
And I absolutely don't want it to be expanded to 13 justices now that Donald Trump is in power and the Republicans are in power. And I'll tell you a little bit about why I actually think that from a fairness perspective. When Justice Scalia died during President Obama's administration, his seat was held open for 11 months.
Yeah.
And President Obama's pick for the Supreme Court, Merrick Garland, never got a hearing.
Right.
Yeah. And then as soon as Trump won, they filled the seat. And they said this was based on some long-standing tradition that they had made up, right? That in an election year, we just wait. We wait for the next presidential election, and that person gets to appoint the Supreme Court justice. It's totally made up, but okay. Fast forward to 2020, election year.
Yes.
My old boss passes away, Justice Ginsburg, and voting was happening at the time. Early voting was happening when she passed away. It had already started. And by that same tradition that they made up in 2016, they should have held that seat open, and President Biden should have gotten to fill it. Instead, they rammed through in just unprecedented time almost.
Yes, they did.
Amy Coney Barrett. So that's 2 seats, right? That the Republicans have frankly played games with. And is it fair to balance things back out? Yes. Now, all that said, I mentioned my preferred reform for the Supreme Court, which is one 18-year term, because I'm also a realist, and I recognize we live in close to a 50-50 country. And I'm sitting here and I'm making the case as a Democrat for why we should expand the court right now, right? But I also know realistically what's going to happen the next time Republicans are in power if we had done that the last time. They were going to add 17 seats, right? And eventually, the truth of the matter is, we're going to have a U.S. Supreme Court that we're going to need to seat in Michigan Stadium, right, to hear cases. So I realize that from a political perspective, which is why my preferred outcome here is one 18-year term. I think that's fair to everybody. That's the reform that I think makes the most sense. But I do think, I will be honest, and I'm sort of wearing a partisan hat right now, but I think there's a very strong case given the total inconsistencies between the Justice Scalia's death in 2016 and Justice Ginsburg's death in 2020 for the Democrats to add seats to the Supreme Court just to balance things back out to where they should have been.
Okay, so let's.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we're going to come on back down here to Washtenaw County.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more about your diversion program and what you have going on in Washtenaw.
Yeah, so we've got several diversion programs, but let's talk about the pre-plea diversion program that I referenced at the outset. So frequently in our justice system, we see people that are accused of lower level offenses that don't impact community safety immediately. And we can see this is somebody that needs treatment, they need help, they need a nudge to get back on the right path. And we don't want them going further down the wrong path because that's bad for public safety.
Absolutely.
So traditionally what we've done in the justice system is we say, okay, well, we're going to hook you up with sort of rehabilitative programming. And the way that we're going to do that is by having you plead guilty to a crime, and then we'll put you on probation, and probation will hook you up with services and a plan, right? And sometimes you can say, then the case can be dismissed at the end of probation or it could be expunged, but you always have to plead guilty in order to get on probation, which we say we're doing as a favor.
Absolutely.
And so we said, okay, but wait a minute though. We know that the minute you plead guilty to a crime, you've got to check that box on a job application, on a housing application, if you're trying to continue your education. And even if that case is going to be expunged or dismissed at the end of probation or whatever,
It's still there.
it's still there. A lot of employers ask me, have you ever pleaded guilty to a crime? During that period that you're on probation, it can impact your ability to stabilize your life, to get secure housing, to get employment, right? And then the other aspect of this is actually for non-citizens. Merely pleading guilty to a crime, even if it's later expunged, even if the judge takes it under advisement and dismisses it at the end of probation or whatever,
It sticks with
the
them.
minute you plead guilty, that triggers immigration consequences.
Yeah.
So we said, look, if we're trying to get people back on the right track, why are we insisting on a guilty plea?
Yes.
Right? Why don't we rewind the clock? And we work with probation to set up this program. We have great partners on it because probation knows all the services, right? And how to put together an individualized plan for people. And we had to get special dispensation for this program from the Michigan Supreme Court because no program like it exists in Michigan. And we have to pay for probation fees, probation oversight fees, right? Like out of our own pocket. We just have a line item in the prosecutor's budget. It's an investment that we think is worth it. But like I said, it's worked
Yes.
because we're getting people the help and treatment without also, by the same token, holding them back by forcing
destroying
them
their
to plead guilty to a crime. And that helps with success. It helps with recovery. If you've got somebody that's dealing with something in their lives that has caused them to commit a crime with substance use issues, mental health issues, I got to tell you, the grief cases are actually some of those, the ones that like stick with me the most, right? People that lost loved ones unexpectedly and they're stealing stuff because it makes them feel alive, because they're in a fog. You need grief counseling, right? If at the same time we're saying, here's your individualized plan, here's the treatment that we want you to go under, we're also saying, but you may not be able to get your next apartment. We've just undone whatever we've gained because we know stability is so important. So again, we tried it out and it's working, and it's working really well. I mean, literally, you can't get better than a 0% recidivism rate, which is what this program has now.
0%.
0%. Not one person that successfully completed it has been rearrested or accused of a new crime. Not one.
because you gave them something to stand on, right? You gave them back their livelihood and you attacked the actual problem.
Exactly.
Instead of locking them up, sometimes getting medication, sometimes not, and just keep that continuing door opening and closing and opening and closing. So that's absolutely wonderful in what you're doing.
And that's commendable, you know, because there are a lot of people that look like Alexis and I that are the ones that are the beneficiaries to that. But I want you to kind of, you know, talk a little bit about a prosecutor and what a prosecutor, because you have to make a lot of decisions when people come in front of you to work with the defense attorneys, and talk about a little bit about what you do as a prosecutor.
Sure. So, prosecutor's job, broadly speaking, starts when we get a case submitted to us from law enforcement. Law enforcement will do the investigation. They'll submit the case to us, and we'll decide whether the case warrants charges or whether it doesn't. And, you know, sometimes we'll exercise our discretion and just say this is not something for the criminal system, but frequently we're just looking at the evidence, right? And is the evidence there that's sufficient to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt? So that's the first thing that the prosecutor's office does. If we do charge a case, then we're in charge of litigating that case on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan. Defendant has a defense attorney. We're, of course, the prosecutors. And there's a lot of discretion that goes into how we prosecute a case, too. Starting with charging, like, what do you charge somebody with? Because there can frequently be a number of menu options available. And then you move into, okay, are we going to put this person into a diversion program, offer a diversion program, right?
When you said diversion program, explain what you mean.
Diversion program was what we were just talking about, right? So, it diverts you out of the system.
Okay.
So, it's like our pre-plea diversion program is the one where we hook people up with services, right, and they don't have to plead guilty. And we have other diversion programs too that work differently, right? If it's a young person, are we going to offer them an opportunity to have their record sealed under the Homeless Youthful Trainee Act?
Right, that's what I was trying to get to.
Yep, and which applies, you know, to anybody under 26, and you know what it provides for is a young person, if they're convicted of a crime, the judge can sort of hold it under advisement. They can do probation. Sometimes they can even go to jail, right? But at the end of it, if they do everything right, the record is totally sealed, so it doesn't even of the fact that there were court proceedings, so it doesn't carry with them and impact their lives the rest of the way. So these are decisions that we make, right, about whether we're going to offer that, allow for that. Obviously, you know, there are cases, there are very serious cases that we just take to trial. Sexual assault cases, violent crime, murders, and then we're in charge of convincing a jury to convict. So it really runs the gamut. But the important thing about the prosecutor's office is there's you need to do the job well, and I'm extremely proud of our team. We have tremendously talented lawyers that are in court every day.
And I'm going to give you a chance to shout out to a couple of them that you may want to shout out. Because I know they might be watching the show, so we know
If they're
that.
watching the show, it's a Friday. No. Look. I'm proud of our entire team, and if you have me start doing shout outs, I'm going to start shouting out 50 people, because it is a team effort in a prosecutor's office, not just with the attorneys, but we have victim advocates that do just incredibly crucial work. They're the front lines of communication between the victim and the office.
Yes.
Okay.
And we're talking about people that may have experienced the most traumatic thing that's happened to them in their life. We're talking about a court process that can often be very, very frustrating and very drawn out. And our victim advocates do just tremendous work there, and as do our legal assistants, right, who are on call, the ones that are typing up things that need to be filed right away, making sure that everything runs smoothly. So frequently you focus on the lawyers who are in court, who are trying the case, who are in front of the cameras. It is a total team effort, and everybody plays just a crucial role in dispensing justice. So I'm not gonna name everybody unless you want me to just like read off the list of everybody that works in my office.
So we'd have to be longer than another hour.
Exactly.
But
So let me just real quick. So let me ask you this: with the run for AG, any of these programs that you're currently doing in Washtenaw, do you see trying to implement them throughout the state or anything like that? What would you bring from Washtenaw to the AG's office?
Yes. So a couple of things. And I'm going to switch tracks a little bit, but on the criminal justice piece, absolutely with these diversion programs. I mean, we've got the data to prove it. We've got the data to show that it works. Now, you need buy-in from local judges and probation departments and prosecutors, right, to make this program work. But what I plan to do as AG certainly is to offer our assistance at setting up any of these programs, just like AG Nessel has done this with Jobs Court in several
Yes.
counties. And the other thing is, actually, there are some barriers to implementing these programs that I think can be financial barriers that I think can be addressed by an attorney general opinion. One of the reasons that we have to pay out of pocket for it is because there's an attorney general opinion which restricts funding in a particular way from back in the 1980s.
Okay, so some
so
things need to be updated.
amending that I think could be something that would be appropriate. But I will seek to remove any barriers that stand in the way of communities putting in place these programs. I will advocate for the legislature to fund these programs because at the end of the day, these programs are investments
Yes, in
that
people.
in people. And it means fewer victims in the future.
Yes.
It means we're saving money on court costs. It makes sense to invest in people at the front end
Yes.
rather than continually punish them on the back end once they've potentially harmed somebody.
Exactly.
Right? The other thing that I'll mention that I really want to bring from my experience in Washington County to the AG's office is a robust focus on worker and consumer protection. We have the only economic justice unit in a prosecutor's office in the state of Michigan, which focuses specifically on worker and consumer protection, which means we go after bosses who are engaged in wage theft and stealing from their workers.
Yes.
We go after predatory companies that are scamming seniors. And we've had a lot of litigation against out-of-state slumlords
Yes.
who are just maintaining homes in dilapidated conditions, advertising them as though they are pristine, and often taking advantage of the most vulnerable among us, refugees, low-income folks who they know can't afford a lawyer, and we've gone into court and we've sued on behalf of them. And
wonderful.
that is the work of an AG, right? Go against the powerful interests on behalf of people,
Yes.
especially when they may not be able to afford representation of their own.
Absolutely.
So that's going to be another priority of mine.
That's awesome.
And I'm looking at Alexis today, and I'm saying to myself, it's like, when I have a guest here that gets Alexis so engaged in the conversation,
Right, keep me quiet.
and I mean, she is just so in tune. And I'm gonna give Tim Smith, our engineer, credit as well, because I'm looking at Tim, and Tim is like engineering the show. But Tim is like, wow. I'm seeing the reaction on Tim. And Tim doesn't get that way with too many guests that I have on the show. So Prosecutor Savitt, you're doing us all justice, by saying what you're saying. But the other
learning
question.
more, just
Exactly.
finding out who you are as an individual. How do you think? Where your heart, right? Because I believe in great leaders lead with their heart, not just with their thoughts, not just with their mind of my opinion and this is what goes. But to me, it feels like you lead with your heart, and that's what makes a great leader.
And I'm going to ask you, too, because we like to always touch upon two questions. One, you're a public servant or you're an elected official?
I'm a public servant.
Why do you say it?
Lead with your heart.
Because that's what this work is about. When people are like, oh, I'm an elected official, it's about the regalia. It's about being called the honorable when you go to these banquets and everything like that, right? It's about
And there's a separate list that you have to sign in on.
right. Like it's status, right? Like being an elected official conveys status, and people want status, right? When they view themselves as an elected official over being a public servant. That's how I view it, at least. I'm in my position because the people of my county entrusted me to do incredibly important work. Like I said, a few minutes ago, in cases where, juvenile cases, misdemeanor cases, felony cases, right? We do child support cases, the economic justice cases, about the roof over your head. They entrusted me to handle these cases that for the people involved in them are the most important thing going on in their life. That's a public servant. The elected official part of it is totally secondary. That's, so public servant.
Okay.
Love it.
And then the other question I want to ask you, too, is that your parents, are they still with us?
They are.
If your mother had to go and give one word to describe her the young man that she named Ellie Savage, what would she say?
I think she'd say I'm passionate. If I'm channeling my mom, and now, Darwin, you're gonna make me call my mom on the way home. I'm gonna be like, what's the one word? I'm gonna see if I got it right. Because
She might call the station. And say,
yeah, you gotta have her on.
And then what's the one word that your father would use to describe you?
Stubborn.
Okay.
My father dealt with me throughout my teenage years. I have great parents, but I think my father knows that I stand for what I believe in, and it sort of coheres with my mother's passionate, because
Yes.
I am passionate. I can be stubborn, right? If I think something's right, I'm gonna argue it to the death.
Absolutely.
And that's the home that my parents raised me in.
Well, see, it's good to
love
get a
that.
prosecutor to smile, Alexis. So, I'm sitting there smiling when he's giving that response like that. So that's
Yes.
good. But we got to take a break. So we will be right back with Washtenaw County Prosecutor Ellie Savage. Stay tuned.
Maureen Jackson thought she had it all until she was faced with the challenges of raising an autistic child. Inspired by autism is her brutally honest journey filled with heartbreak and triumph. Get your copy and find the support you deserve today by visiting www.claudrinejackson.tv.
Good morning. Today's a beautiful day, and today's not only a beautiful day because we're here in Inkster, but it's a beautiful day because I'm here with Pastor Gene Overman. I have the pleasure to serve on Operation Refuge as a board of director. This organization not only serves Inkster, but the neighborhood communities. I mean, the work we do here is beyond. It's led by Pastor Gene Overman. I've known Pastor Gene Overman for over 10 years. Everybody claims that that's her son, this is that. I mean, we go way back. She's mentored me. She's helped me throughout my career. I love you, Pastor. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on today?
Well, we're so excited, and thank you, Safe, for bringing a team in to really help us get the word out. Today we're doing our food that we do consistently every Wednesday and Thursday throughout the month, and just very excited to share with everyone listening that Operation Refuge has Mother's Pantry. It is a client choice food pantry that we're very thankful that you come in here and it's a place of dignity. You shop just like you're at Trader Joe's, hopefully, or one of the better grocery stores. So we're on the main strip because we want our families to leave those houses if you have a need and come over. And that's whether you're here, Dearborn Heights, Garden City, all of our surrounding communities in southeast Michigan, Wayne County actually, we really serve great food. And we have lots of programs. But today we're here talking about Mother's Pantry, and you get the chance to see some of the interactivity at Mother's Pantry with our families. And sometimes there's a great need, and sometimes you find yourself the working, underemployed. So we have lots of Alice families where you're right at that threshold where you cannot receive benefits, but you still need that support. So we're very thankful that through many partnerships with Operation Refuge, we are able to provide good, nutritious food.
What I love about our pantry is the fact that you can come in, park your car, and shop like you're walking into a grocery store.
Yes.
Nobody can tell you can't take this or you can't take that, and that's a sense of pride where you're not hurting anybody's feelings, and then I could walk in, get what I want, and leave. I mean, that's an
And you
amazing.
leave with your dignity, and
Exactly.
oftentimes when we have food insecurity, you feel some sort of way to start with, right?
Absolutely.
So when you come in, we want to have the best choices.
Yeah.
And thankfully, we really do have excellent choices. We have halal, we have kosher, and we have partners that ensure that we keep what all of our families need.
Yeah.
So we're just very thankful.
It's your leadership and your vision. That's why, right?
And the board of directors,
Yeah,
right? I
absolutely.
can't get it done without
Absolutely.
you all. And as you see from the young man, you leave with fresh pineapple.
I love
fresh
it.
food,
I love it.
Right? And whether you're walking
I love
or you're
it.
able to drive up, our door is open for you.
And then the line, I can see
Yeah.
the line.
Yeah,
I mean, when
and
I pulled
actually
up, was all the
shortening, yeah.
it was all the way down to the STEM building. So
Yeah,
it's
so-
amazing. It's a sunny day. Come to Inkster, folks. Thank you,
Yeah.
Pastor. I
Thank
love
you.
I'm Deborah Geraldine Bledsoe Ford, and I want to celebrate 3 Hall of Fame women. My aunt, Anita Ford Allen, the first female president of the D.C. School Board. My grandmother, Geraldine Bledsoe, a member of the Michigan Women's Hall of Fame for fair employment practices in the state of Michigan, and my mother, Geraldine Bledsoe Ford, the third female jurist in the state of Michigan. Each of these women influenced me and many others to be strong, courageous, and self-assured.
Every Monday through Friday from 12 noon to 3 p.m., it's the Tavis Smiley Show on WHPR TV and radio 15.2. Also seen on Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV, iPhone, and Android. That's the Tavis Smiley Show on WHPR TV and radio. Download the WHPR TV app for iOS, Android, and Roku. The Tavis Smiley Show, distributed by R.J. Watkins Studios.
From the desk of R.J. Watkins, this is a WHPR editorial.
I'm Ariana Watkins, and for decades, my father, R.J. Watkins, has served our community with quality radio and TV service through WHPR and Roku. Today, I'm proud to stand beside him, continuing the legacy built on trust, innovation, and your support. We're here because of you, and we'll keep bringing you the best now and for generations to come. Thank you for supporting us and growing with us.
This has been a WHPR editorial.
All media platforms are engaged.
Copy.
Get ready to launch your show or product. Periscope ready. We're 5x5 ready to launch. Copy that. Trend worldwide across all major platforms.
Ignition. 3, 2, 1.
The world is waiting. Watkins Broadcasting, more than just TV.
313watkins.com. Streaming on Roku.
And welcome back, and you are watching a very special edition of Truth to Power. And just before we get started, just a quick housekeeping. Just wanted to say, as a lot of you know, next month is Heart Month and National Go Red Month. And there's a lot of people that are really concerned about heart health. And there's a workshop that's going to be going on next month, and it's on February the 7th. From 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock at 318 Auburn Road in Pontiac, Michigan. And basically they're going to have workshops that are going to talk about heart healthy exercises, blood pressure checks, stop the bleeding, heart healthy diets, as well as the different recipes that you can eat. And also they're looking at, too, giving you resources from local healthcare and community providers. So again, this is going to be in Pontiac. If you'd like to get more information, you can contact Denise Harris at area code 248-778-7161 for more information. And this is regarding making certain that healthy hearts stay healthy. And we want to make certain that everybody gets an opportunity to go and hear one of their keynote speakers that they're going to have on February the 7th is DeQuindra Quinn Blakey, and she's going to talk about our health and our lives, so you won't want to miss that. But we are here today with I want to say all Detroit, and he has been a co-host with me on this journey several times. And when you think about the city of Detroit, you think in terms of, say, about Roy McAllister Jr., the Honorable Roy McAllister Jr., that was a prominent city council person in District 2 in the city of Detroit. So we are joined on this last hour with Councilman Roy McAllister Jr. Thank you, Roy, for coming on and being a special guest with Prosecutor Savage.
Darwin, thank you so very much for allowing me to be on this show and with Prosecutor Savitt today. Thank you.
And I do want to thank the Honorable Alexis Ramsey for giving us an opportunity to kind of get a little bit into your background and what you do in Washtenaw County. But I just want to ask you too, before I let Roy, ask a couple of questions. Prosecutor Savitt, is there anything else that you do in your offices that you'd like to also, talk about as well to our viewing public?
Sure. One other unit that we haven't talked about that I started as prosecutor is a conviction, integrity, and expungement unit. And that unit has two functions. One is it investigates and, where the evidence dictates, remedies wrongful convictions. People who are serving prison time for a crime that they simply did not commit. I think that's an obligation that all prosecutors have, really. And remedying that error is tremendously important, because I think that a wrongful conviction, sending somebody away for something they didn't do or where their constitutional rights were violated, that is the worst mistake the government can make. Not just the prosecutor, not just the judicial system, but getting the wrong person, depriving them of their liberty, taking them away from their families, worst mistake the government can make. And wanted to have a unit that could look into claims of actual innocence, could investigate them, and we've gotten several exonerations stemming from those investigations. The other important function that this unit facilitates is it provides free expungement assistance in coalition with our partners at the Public Defender's Office, Sheriff's Office, and Legal Services for eligible Washtenaw County residents. And that's important because we actually passed a really good package of bills, bipartisan, by the way, back in 2019 in Michigan, I think it was 2019, which really expanded access to expungement, allowing people who've done everything right after they've been convicted of a crime to get a clean slate, so they don't have to disclose a conviction on a job or housing application. Problem with that remains that people often don't feel comfortable going through the legal process themselves, right? And a lawyer is going to charge you probably $2,000, because lawyers got to eat, to do an expungement. Well, the number one reason people want an expungement is because they want a job or they want to get a better job, right? If that's your situation, that criminal conviction may be holding you back, but you don't have the money until you get the job to get it expunged through a private lawyer. So we said, why don't we work in coordination with partners here and offer this free of charge? We also work with Michigan Works on this program, something that was pioneered really in the city of Detroit with Project Clean Slate, fantastic program. So that's another service that we provide that's new under my administration, and it's something that I really enjoy doing.
Okay. Roy?
Wow.
I know Alexis was a hard act to follow. So
Yes, she is. But even more so, Prosecutor Savitt, I am so impressed with you. I mean, I was listening while Alexis was on, and being a former commanding officer of Detroit Homicide Section, we look at things from a prosecutorial manner. But then also, I also worked with the Federal Defender's Office for those who have been, convicted and coming back. And I've also worked with, when I was on city council, a number of people who were falsely arrested and expunged. And, that was such a promising thing, because what I did was I called them, although it was more, I brought them before city council and called them the Michigan 13. And although they, also help fight with other groups for them to get paid for the falsely incarceration, you can never bring back the years of being incarcerated, of missing graduations, baseball, football games, dances, birthdays. You can never bring that back. So I'm just so impressed with you, and you're definitely, I had this wonderful opportunity and pleasure to meet you today, And I definitely look forward to working with you in the future, because when Darwin, you asked the question, are you a public servant or a public official? The question was asked. I truly believe in being a public servant, because it is about where your heart is and what people have to do. And, you know, I just want to say some other things to bring out, because, you know, on WHPR, Truth to Power, Darwin, we bring out the information, we bring out the facts. And, you know, prosecutors, you know, you talked about working for, as a clerk for Supreme Court Justices Ruth Ginsburg and Sandra Day O'Connor. But it also needs to be brought out that you was also part of the U.S. District Court of Justice of Appeals, and you worked for Justices David Tate and Carlo Bia. And so these are the things that when we look at people and how people, where people's heart is. But one of the things I want to ask you, and when I speak for how a person in the streets would ask a question. So one of the things I want to ask you, let's go back to this public servant issue. You know, a lot of times, and I've learned this, Darwin, from being as multiple careers, a lot of times when you're a public servant, you are dealing with people, if you are not following their agenda, they want to either eliminate you or remove you. How do you deal with that, and how will you deal with that in the future?
It's a great question, and look, especially in this job.
Yes, sir.
You are never going to make everybody happy.
Yes, sir.
Right? There's just no question about it. And the only thing that I can do is to try to do what I think is right, to try to do what I think is beneficial for the community. Now, of course, you take into account, you know, feedback and all the in the prosecutorial sphere, all the facts and the evidence, and you never want to surround yourself with just yes people. So
Yes.
I always run things by my staff on big decisions. What do you think about this? Right? What should we do here? And you have to take that seriously.
Yes, sir.
Right? They all come from different backgrounds, right? Have different perspectives on it. I want to know all of that, and I really want honesty. It doesn't mean I'm going to agree with them, but I'm never going to be mad at somebody that works for me if they give a dissenting opinion, because that's how we do better.
Yes, sir.
Right? When we
Yes,
consider
sir.
all that. But you do that, and at the end of the day, you got to do just what you think is right, what you think is the best thing for the community. And you know, you know this from your work. There's some situations where you're trying to do the least bad thing,
Yes,
right?
sir.
Like something bad has happened in the community. What is the least bad way of addressing it? Frankly, using the very imperfect system that we have, right? We need more resources for mental health treatment, right? You see so much of this, right? For
Yes, sir.
for young people that are in the juvenile system, there needs to be more resources there. But okay, you work with what you have. You make the decision that you think is best for the community. Remember that you're the person that the entire community entrusted with this work. They entrusted you to make those hard calls. And at the end of the day, if it turns out to be unpopular, I don't win my next election, okay. At least I can rest my head knowing that I did what I thought was right. Once you start getting down the path, I think, of worrying about your next election, worry about what your campaign donors are going to think, worry about how it's going to play politically, you've lost the plot. Do what you think is right. And even if it costs you politically, I'd much rather have that than sell out my soul, sell out my values, sell out what I believe in.
Yeah, it's always about being able to look yourself in the mirror and say, I did all right.
Yeah.
I did all right. You know, I have a question, Darwin, that was sent to me from, like I said, you have a lot of listeners. And one listener says, given that officers of the court, we are expected to always act honorably and uphold our duty of candor before the tribunal, how will you balance that duty with the pressures that comes with being a prosecutor and an attorney general to win, and the temptation to push convictions or pleas at all costs? It's kind of like similar to the question I just asked.
You know, the way that the U.S. Supreme Court once described prosecutors is they said prosecutor's role is not to secure convictions, but to ensure that justice is done.
Yes, sir.
My client as prosecutor and who my client would be as attorney general is the people of the state of Michigan. My client is not the victim. My client is not any particular theory of the case. My client is not law enforcement, as you know, right?
Yes, sir.
It's the whole people of the state of Michigan.
All right.
And the interest of the whole people of the state of Michigan is to ensure that justice is done. Now, what does that mean? It can mean actually having to retreat from a position that we took earlier. You know, sometimes we get new information in, and we may have had a case that we think is a rock solid case, and that new information comes in, and we've got to drop it.
Yes, sir.
We just ethically have to drop it.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes new information can come in that can go the other way,
Yes, sir.
right? You know, I mean, there's been cases that we thought were one thing and then it turned out to be far more serious. And that means that we've got to up the charges, right, for community safety's sake. So I think just bearing in mind who your client is as a lawyer is how you deal with that. Your client is the people of the state of Michigan. Their interest is in justice,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Not just in convictions, right? In justice being done. And the other thing I'll say is this. I have never used conviction rates as a metric in my office by which I judge attorneys. Because once you do that, you're setting people up for the wrong incentives. I want an attorney who, when they get new information in, a supplemental report from law enforcement, and they say, ooh, boy, I think we may have got this one wrong at the charging stage, right? That's going to say that, bring it to us, and say, my recommendation is that we drop this case, even if it's not going to be popular, even if, you know, it's going to undermine my conviction rate, right? Because now I've got a dismiss case on my metrics or whatever.
Yes, sir. Yes,
We judge our attorneys in our office by how thorough, professional, and well they do their job, right? Not on conviction rates, not on any numeric metrics, which I feel very, very strongly about. And I think that's one way that you balance against that constant pressure just to get convictions for the sake of getting convictions. That's not justice, and that's not how we should be judging attorneys.
Okay. Dara, I have one more before I have a number of questions, but I know you have some questions. And I just have one more. I just want to go back to earlier you spoke, prosecutors, about you know, going after those folks that have been that are vulnerable, and I always look at, and when I was on the police department and when I worked for the federal defender, especially with the federal defenders, what really got me upset was back in 2008 in the housing industry. You had a number of people who lost their homes, you know, their livelihood, their dreams, whatever, because the banks sold them knowing that they were unable to continue to maintain the mortgage that was placed upon them. And you have people that have lost their homes and again lost their dreams, but not one banker or institution has been held accountable. Can you just give me your position on that, sir?
You know, actually, in a lot of ways, it ties into your previous question.
Okay, yeah.
Because the other issue with judging people based on conviction rates is that sometimes they only take on the easy cases, the ones where a conviction is assured, and they are afraid to go after white-collar criminals, bankers who have engaged in tremendous destructive behavior, tremendously destructive behavior, far more than you see, you know, an individual that may do something on the street, right? I mean, like, the financial crisis that was created, I mean, millions of families' lives were upended.
Yes, sir.
Irreparably. Because, as you say, they knew they were selling products, financial products, that were doomed to fail and were going to leave people homeless.
Yes, sir.
Right? I feel very strongly, again, for the same reasons, it's not just that we shouldn't be always pursuing an easy conviction. We should also be seeking hard convictions.
Yes, sir.
When justice demands it and when the evidence is there. And that, I think, is a failure of our justice system in responding to the financial crisis, as you noted. Now, the other thing that I'll say is this. I'm not somebody who's ever been afraid to take on tough fights or powerful adversaries. You know, we were the first city in the state of Michigan, in Detroit, to sue the opioid industry. That was a case that I led,
Mhm.
I got threatened by the opioid industry.
I know.
They
I know
told
that.
me they were going to seek sanctions against me if we filed that complaint. Tell you what, I still haven't been sanctioned. Because here's a legal tip:
Yeah.
can't be sanctioned for filing a frivolous lawsuit if you win the lawsuit. but that's what I mean. It's the power imbalance you see
Yes, sir.
so frequently.
Mhm.
That's why we need government to hold people accountable.
Yes, sir.
People and corporations.
So let's talk a little bit about Prosecutor Savitt about what happened the other day when it comes down to ICE being there in Ypsilanti.
Yep.
Can you address that?
Yeah, so I don't know, and I just for context, for those who may not know, there were reports that ICE had arrested parents of children at a bus stop picking their kids up from school. I have no inside information on this. I know it was reported by Ypsilanti Community Schools. I know it was reported by the Sheriff's Office, and I know that ICE has denied doing anything of the kind. Here's where I come out on this. No parent should ever be afraid to take their child to school, to pick their child up from school. No child should be in fear at school or en route to school or on the way home from school that they're going to see mom or dad arrested at the end of it. And we should never be deterring children that live in our communities from gaining access to an education. It's just immoral. Now, I'm glad to hear that ICE said they weren't doing that. That's great. We also need stronger legal protections around that. There's a package of bills that were just up in the Senate yesterday, which would
Right.
prohibit civil immigration enforcement at schools, at hospitals, at courthouses, at places of worship, and at shelters that serve victims of, for example, domestic and sexual violence. All of this is tremendously important. We are seeing a culture of fear right now being intentionally created by the Trump administration and by the way ICE is operating. And when you have a culture of fear, people go underground. And what that means is kids aren't going to school. You saw just yesterday, Superintendent Beatty, I think, here in DPSCD, said they're seeing a drop in attendance because families are afraid to send their kids to school lest they get on the radar of the federal government, right? I've talked to our own superintendent in Washington County. She said the same thing. I've seen, and I know prosecutors around the country have seen this, victims not showing up to court, non-citizens victims not showing up to court to testify against the person who harmed them because they're more afraid of the government than they are of that person who harmed them. That's an unacceptable situation. It's bad for public safety. It's bad for education. Think about these kids in 10 years. If you're not going to school now, you're 5 years old, and you remain underground, we're going to have a whole class of kids in this country that are uneducated.
Right.
That's bad for everybody. It's bad for public safety. It's bad for our economy. It's bad for health. So whatever happened in Ypsilanti yesterday, and I certainly hope that ICE isn't targeting people at schools or bus stops, but okay, they say that. Let's guarantee it. Let's pass those bills. SBs 508 to 510 need to be passed like tomorrow.
When you say, what do you mean? Explain what that bill is.
Sorry. Those are the bills I was referencing in the legislature that would prohibit civil immigration enforcement at schools, hospitals, places of worship, domestic violence shelters, and courthouses, right? Of course, if you have a judicial warrant, there's nothing that the legislature can do to stop that, right? So there's an exception if you have a judicial warrant, but it would prohibit civil immigration arrests, which is generally what ICE is doing at those locations. So by state law, that's what those bills would do, and I'm really hoping that they pass the legislature.
And let's, in the 5 minutes that we have left for the segment, let's talk about what's going on in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Can you address that?
Yeah. What's going on in Minnesota is atrocious. It's appalling, and what we are seeing is the president using ICE as a quasi-military force to occupy an American city. I mean, that's what he's doing here, right? ICE was sent to Minnesota because President Trump has some beef with Tim Walz, right? The way ICE is operating too, and I'm sure you can back me up on this as a former law enforcement officer, is extraordinarily dangerous.
It is.
Operating behind masks, without insignia, taking people off the street,
Yes.
and throwing them into unmarked vans. It was only a matter of time before somebody got killed. And I'm still think actually in some ways we're lucky in this country that we have not seen open firefights on the streets of American cities because of how they're operating. Because you have somebody that's armed. If you're going to get thrown in a van, you're thinking you're being kidnapped. Somebody, a good Samaritan that's armed may say, I'm seeing a kidnapping operation. I'm seeing a human trafficking operation, right? And start engaging in a firefight with ICE officers. It's dangerous to the officers. It's dangerous to communities. It's dangerous to everybody. It's irresponsible. And so too is the way that they've been responding to bystanders and protesters, pepper spraying them, throwing them to the ground. We saw the video of what happened last Saturday. I mean, just as well as a couple weeks earlier. It's horrendous. And I give tremendous credit to AG Keith Ellison in Minnesota, product of Detroit, by the way, right? For standing up and filing a lawsuit challenging these ICE practices. State AGs can't prohibit federal immigration enforcement entirely, right? They can't just like kick them out of Minnesota. But he brought a very smart lawsuit saying, what I'm challenging is the way you're doing this. What I'm challenging is the masks and the pepper spray and throwing people into unmarked vans, right? And the racial profiling and the lack of any clear mission that you have here. And, you know, I'll say I think we need more of those lawsuits. I've actually been proud to support A.G. Ellison's lawsuits. I joined with a coalition of city and counties and elected leaders from across the nation in supporting that lawsuit because this is creating fear everywhere. Like literally what's happening in Minnesota, it doesn't matter that it's not happening in Detroit or in Michigan right now. We're seeing families that are going underground.
Yeah.
Simply because of what they're seeing on TV.
Yeah. And that's the one thing that really is kind of, you know, it's sad to see families that don't want to live outside of their normal reign, you know, in realm in terms of say to go outside in fear of somebody coming up to them and wanting to arrest them, wanting to, like you said, throw them into a van, wanting to put them on the ground. And then it makes me think back to what happened in terms of George Floyd and that situation, you know, and all these things are going on in the great state of Minnesota. And you've got a lot of people that are in fear, you know, of riding down, you know, in their vehicles. Now the other question I want to ask you too is that now they're talking about detention centers. And they're talking about a detention center possibly here in Highland Park. They're talking about detention centers in
Romulus.
And now we know that there's a detention center. I talked about that with my guest last week with State Senator Stephanie Chang about the detention center in Baldwin, Michigan. And, you know, and they're talking about like the almost to the max when it comes to the overcrowding part. And then, you know, I want to address this with Roy in our last, you know, half an hour to talk about the mental health piece when it comes down to persons that may have situations where some people are feeling like since they've closed some of the mental health hospitals and facilities, that they're just throwing them in jail. And that's their way to, you know, to incarcerate them, to get them off the street and that kind of thing. So we got to take another break. And we'll be right back. So I want to address that mental health piece with you in this last half an hour we have. So we are on a special edition of Truth to Power. Our special guest, first, it is the young man who is the Washtenaw County prosecutor, Eli Savitt. I'm almost trying to keep from saying Eli versus Eli. But everybody's going to know that name. And then the Honorable Roy McAllister Jr. We'll be right back.
Good morning. Today's a beautiful day, and today's not only a beautiful day because we're here in Inkster, but it's a beautiful day because I'm here with Pastor Gene Overman. I have the pleasure to serve on Operation Refuge as a board of director. This organization not only serves Inkster, but the neighborhood communities. I mean, the work we do here is beyond. It's led by Pastor Gene Overman. I've known Pastor Gene Overman for over 10 years. Everybody claims that that's her son, this is that. I mean, we go way back. She's mentored me. She's helped me throughout my career. I love you, Pastor. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on today?
Well, we're so excited, and thank you, Safe, for bringing a team in to really help us get the word out. Today we're doing our food that we do consistently every Wednesday and Thursday throughout the month, and just very excited to share with everyone listening that Operation Refuge has Mother's Pantry. It is a client choice food pantry that we are very thankful that you come in here and it's a place of dignity. You shop just like you're at Trader Joe's, hopefully, or one of the better grocery stores. So we're on the main strip because we want our families to leave those houses if you have a need and come over. And that's whether you're here, Dearborn Heights, Garden City, all of our surrounding communities in Southeast Michigan, Wayne County actually, we really serve great food. And we have lots of programs. But today we're here talking about Mother's Pantry, and you get the chance to see some of the interactivity at Mother's Pantry with our families. And sometimes there's a great need, and sometimes you find yourself the working underemployed. So we have lots of Alice families where you're right at that threshold where you cannot receive benefits, but you still need that support. So we're very thankful that through many partnerships with Operation Refuge, we are able to provide good, nutritious food.
What I love about our pantry is the fact that you can come in, park your car, and shop like you're walking into a grocery store.
Yes.
Nobody can tell you you can't take this or you can't take that, and that's a sense of pride where you're not hurting anybody's feelings, and then I can walk in, get what I want, and leave. I mean, that's an amazing.
And you leave with your dignity, and
Exactly.
oftentimes when we have food insecurity, you feel some sort of way to start with, right?
Absolutely.
So when you come in, we want to have the best choices.
Yeah.
And thankfully, we really do have excellent choices. We have halal, we have kosher, and we have partners that ensure that we keep what all of our families need.
Yeah.
So we're just very thankful.
It's your leadership and your vision. That's why, right?
And the board of directors,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I can't get it done without
Absolutely.
you all. And as you see from the young man, you leave with fresh pineapple.
I love
fresh
it.
fruit,
I love it.
Right? And whether you're walking
I
or
love
you're
it.
able to drive up, our door is open for you.
And then the line, I can see
Yeah.
the line.
Yeah,
I mean, when
and
I pulled
actually
up, was all the
it's shortening,
it was all the way down to the STEM building. So
Yeah,
it's
so-
amazing. It's a sunny day. Come to Inkster, folks. Thank you,
Yeah.
Pastor. I love
Thank
you.
My fear is not being myself or putting others in harm whenever I'm under the influence. Did you know drivers with a BSC of .08 are 4 times more likely to get in a crash than those with a 0?
There is a reason why the legal drinking age is 21. Underage drinking is ugly because teens who start to drink before the age of 15 are 12 times more likely to be unintentionally injured.
Over 300 fatal crashes and almost 4,000 injury crashes were alcohol related.
Death is ugly, especially senseless avoidable accidents. Yet on average, every 52 minutes, alcohol-impaired driving fatality occurs.
Fees and fines are ugly and I want to get paid, not owing anybody money. If everyone obeyed new driving policies with a BAC of no more than .05, alcohol-impaired driving fatalities, injuries, and total costs could decrease by 71 through 77%.
Help us remind others to not be ugly with alcohol and keep alive with .05. This message was brought to you by the Center for Urban Youth and Family Development. For more information on how you can get involved, email admin@mycap.org.
313watkins.com. Streaming on Roku.
Good morning, and I'm thinking this is close to the afternoon mark, but we are still joined here. We're very honored to have Prosecutor of Washtenaw County, Ellie Savitt, as our guest on the show, along with myself and the Honorable Roy McAllister Jr. But, you know, we are very, very honored to have you here on the station. We here at WHPR TV, you know, want to make certain that we bring the truth, and which becomes someone's power when they're out in the community, and especially in this endeavor, when you're talking about in front of someone that could be a person that can determine your life and your livelihood, as you were, you know, indicating earlier. And you know, there's a lot of things that people don't understand when you talk about the courts. There's a lot of people that are afraid when they go in front of a prosecutor or in front of a judge, you know, as well, because you have that ability to determine somebody's future, be it whether or not if they're able to be with their loved ones, to keep a job, or to even keep their freedom, you know, at the same time. But that's what we do here at WHPR. We want to make certain that we bring people like yourself here, and other black media, the same thing. So what I want you to do, Prosecutor Savitt, is just, why do you think then that it's important to make certain that your messaging resides and resounds in black media?
Well, look, the first thing is I'm running to represent the entire people of the state of Michigan, and that includes, of course, the black community, right? And far too frequently, I know that politicians just ignore constituencies, or they only show up like right before election time and ask for votes and don't have real conversations. And I know that that happens a lot in the black community, right? And I know people are sick of it. So it's important to have these conversations, to have consistent conversations, not just get my message out, but also hear from people, right? That's important for all communities, especially the black community, who I know, frankly, has frequently been taken for granted by my party, by the Democratic Party. Beyond that, I'll say, with respect to my current job and the job that I'm seeking, overseeing the justice system, there is a extraordinarily long history of disparate treatment and disparate impact in black communities. This is true at the criminal level, right? Of course, we know like there's black people are disproportionately likely to be charged, to be incarcerated, even for the same offense. A good example of this was when marijuana was illegal in Michigan, right? Black people were 4.7 times more likely than white people to be arrested for a marijuana crime, even though we know that people smoke weed at roughly the same proportions within racial groups. So we can talk about the inequities in the criminal justice system, and that's something that's really important to talk about and to name. But I mean, Roy mentioned this earlier, the subprime crisis. That was racial redlining, right? And it dates back to racial redlining that occurred in the 1960s, right? Preventing black families from home ownership. And all of this is stuff that was, you know, either tolerated or indeed blessed at some point by our law, by our legal system. And it's had cascading impacts that remain to this day. So it's important to be engaged in conversation. It's important to be on black media. It's important to listen. And that's what I'm committed to doing.
Because see, sometimes people think, and they take black media sometimes for granted, and think that, okay, well, because I'm a Democrat, that I don't have to really get my messaging across in the black media because of the fact that people are going to vote for Democrats, but they don't really know why they're voting for some of the candidates that are seeking our support, you know, in the black communities. And that's one of the things that we try and do here at WHPR, is to let you and other candidates know. Because, you know, just as the thing is that we're making certain that we're giving everybody an opportunity to come on this show, to get a chance to go and talk about what their platforms are. We have had Attorney Bill Noakes to be on the show before. We've got on the 20th of March, we've got Karen McDonald, the prosecutor out in Oakland County, coming on the show as well. And we are very, very fortunate to have you here on this show today to talk about what you're going to do, you know, in that same, you know, in that same vein. Because we want everybody to be educated, to make an empirical decision about who they and why they are supporting a candidate. But that's what we here at Watkins Broadcasting, you know, here want to make certain that we continue to do. And again, would love to have you to come back again. If you are successful in your bid for Attorney General, to come back and let people know what it is that you want to do and what you are implementing in your, you know, in your department. And then all of the things that you have done to pretty much like toot your own horn, you know, just like we were asking you about what you're doing as a prosecutor. and you've made some monumental reforms out in the Washington County community. And, you know, I know several folks that have said how much they really appreciated all the things that you've done, you know, since you have been the prosecutor in Washington County. But is there anything else, Prosecutor Savitt, that people don't know about you that you like for the public to know about you? You know, because and then there's and then people have misconceptions, you know, about things, about themselves. You know, just like the concern about what happened in other situations that have occurred that everybody has had. Well, this is what the media is saying, but this is what really is what happened. But is there anything that you would like to go and talk about you, or talk about any misconceptions that anybody's had in any of the cases that maybe you have, you know, you've tried, or you prosecuted, or anything else that's going on?
You know, we've been here for an hour and 45 minutes, so we've covered a lot of stuff about myself and my background. In terms of misconceptions that may arise in the media, I'll say a couple things that I think it is important to clear up here. One is that there can frequently be a narrative or rumors flying around about a particular case, about something that's happening in either law enforcement or the court system. And it's something that, at least for me personally, I am very, very, very cautious about responding to. And that is because prosecutors have an ethical obligation not to engage in pretrial publicity because it could taint the jury pool.
Right.
And so you'll see me, I mean, this is just how I operate in Washington County. There are cases, of course, of public interest, and we will release information about the charges and the next court date, right, and whether somebody's in custody, which is all factual information that, you know, we need to, public can figure out, right, and deserves to know. But I don't editorialize. I don't do press conferences because I'm very cautious about running afoul of those rules around pretrial publicity in an attempt to shape the narrative. Ultimately, the way that we tell our story, the way that we tell the story of the victims, the way that we tell the story of the case that we want to present is in the courtroom. And I know sometimes, not just with me, but with prosecutors generally, you know, people want more. They want to know the evidence. They want to know, did this person confess? Is there going to be a plea deal? Like, what are you planning on doing with this? I'm not talking about that because it's not fair, it's not ethical, and it's not right. We do our work and we do our talking in court in front of a judge or with papers filed with the court. And I just think that's something that is frequently overlooked about a prosecutor's role generally. And it's an important obligation that we have. Because, you know, we talked about wrongful convictions before. And wrongful convictions really exploded into the national consciousness with the Central Park Five. Right? And the thing about the Central Park Five, of course, a group of 5 young black men that were wrongfully convicted, absolutely exonerated by DNA evidence later on, right? But all gave false confessions, right? Which is a phenomenon that happens when there's a particular narrative being pushed and you have people that are under duress. But there was so much media attention and media scrutiny about that, right? It almost made charges and the focus on them inevitable. And many people had their minds made up, including potentially in the jury pool, about whether they were guilty before they'd actually had a trial, which leads to wrongful convictions. And so, you know, when people think, well, why isn't the prosecutor talking more about this case? To say, well, think about if your loved one was somebody that was facing charges, right? Maybe even somebody who had confessed like the Central Park Five did. Would you want the prosecutor to be out there trumpeting what they have as evidence, a narrative, anything like that? It's against ethical rules, but it's against ethical rules, I think, for a very, very, very good reason. And that's why I don't talk publicly about our cases very much, aside from, you know, what the community needs to know to protect their own safety.
So is there anything in particular, I mean, we talked about you for the last hour and a half.
Yeah.
But is there anything about you that people don't know about you? I mean, we've seen, you know, we know you can shoot some basketball, you know, you can ball, but is there anything else about you that could be of, you know, a human interest about you, you know, in terms of, say, that you'd like the public to know about you?
What I will say, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this because the people are going to ask me to do this, is when I do have spare time, I really actually like to cook. And
sound like you, Roy.
Yeah.
Now,
Me and him go get along very well.
Now, I've been running for statewide office for the last year, right? So I haven't had a lot of time in the kitchen because when I like to cook, I like to experiment, right? I like a lot of spice, a lot of flavor in my food. I'm the type of person that will go into a restaurant and order the extra spicy, and I'll tell the waiter, I'm challenging the chef to make it too spicy for me because, like, they never do, right? So that's something that I really enjoy doing. If I'm spending a day in the kitchen, it's probably some overly complex dish that's going to take all day. But I really love cooking, really love feeding people, and at some point in my life, I'll have the time to do that again. But maybe not in the foreseeable future.
What's your favorite dish that you like to cook?
Okay, so there's two of them actually. One is I make a mean mac and cheese. And it's a recipe that I modified for my mother. It's got a little bit of spice in it. I put jalapenos in it. I know that might sound weird to some people, but like the kick gives it a little bit extra. You put the jalapenos in the roux that you use to make the sauce, right? And it's just got this nice balanced kick throughout the mac and cheese. The other thing that I really like cooking is I love cooking Moroccan food. Like I said, I like a lot of spices. And Moroccan cuisine, you make like these Moroccan stews, tagines, and couscous and everything like that. You just get to spice it up, and that's the kind of food I really like cooking.
Well, Roy, it's so funny because it's like it's good to hear men, and especially them, smile when they talk about what they like to cook, and and especially like when women are always talking about they love to see a man in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Cooking and and that kind of thing. But
they also want you to clean too. That's
absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially about the way you're gonna doctor up the food and put all these spices and cut up all of the jalapenos and things like that. So it's a big difference like that. But we don't have that much time left. But I just want to ask you too. When we're talking about the legal ramifications about running for office, what are some of the things that you see? Because you get out and you meet people all the time. You talk to people over and over again. You got people that come up to you and want to, seek advice or ask you questions about, your office and, about former, cases that you've either, prosecuted or, something like that. But, we know that there's also some horrendous conditions at some of the jails, right now. And I know some people had asked me about, there was a situation where there's mold in one of the prisons, right now. And some people were complaining about the fact that mold was in some of the, persons that were held behind bars in their ears, and and that's one of the things about the inhumane conditions sometimes. And another question too is about the medical care that a lot of the inmates don't receive.
Yeah.
That may be going through. We talked a little bit, Roy, about the mental illness, and some people may have not been on their meds, and that's the reason why they were incarcerated in the first place, in front of you or your other prosecutors. And now then, once they may have been convicted, then now they're, being detained, but they're still not taking that medication or still not on there. And the other question too is that, people are complaining also about the, is there the diet that a lot of times the prisoners may receive? And we know that this is jail. This is not some place that's going to have steak and, eating caviar and that kind of thing.
Well, prosecutor cooks for them,
Exactly, and has the jalapeno.
Yeah, and they got the mac and cheese.
Exactly, and everybody's probably rating his 4 or 5 star cuisine and that kind of thing. But is there anything, can you address any of that, especially with some of the people that may be concerned about the conditions in the jail?
Yeah. Look, we send people to jail, we send people to prison to serve a sentence that requires them to be separated from the community, frequently for community safety's sake, what we don't sentence them to is to be subjected to black mold. We don't sentence them to be subjected to dangerous conditions. We don't sentence them to being unable to access medical care. And yeah, we don't sentence them to eat really subhuman, not nutritious diets, right? When we sentence somebody to jail or prison, they remain human. They remain protected by our 8th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment, right? And everybody understands that jail and prison isn't a vacation, right? But there's a baseline level of humanity that is not just, I think, the right thing to provide, but is constitutionally mandated because of the 8th Amendment. And here's the other thing that I will say about this. I think frequently we think about people that we put in jail or prison or sentenced to serving time, think of them as criminals and they're bad people, and whatever happens to them in there is sort of what they deserve. I disagree with that. But also, 95% of the people that are going to jail or prison, I'm talking about prison actually now, are coming home. More if you send them to jail, it's only a year max. So almost all these people are coming home. How do we want them reintegrating back in our communities?
Right.
Do we want them traumatized? Do we want them sick and unable to work? That's going to lead to recidivism. The best thing that we can do to prevent somebody from committing a crime again, even if you don't care about any of the other stuff, is to allow them stability, a stable job, right? Secure housing, health, well-being, right? That's the stuff that ultimately prevents recidivism. And if you're too sick to work, right? If you've been subject to horrendous conditions inside of a prison, right? You may be too traumatized. You may go back out and you may hurt somebody. It doesn't promote the rehabilitative aspect that we should demand in our carceral system.
Prosecutor Savage, I know we got a short amount of time, but you said the word there that a lot of people have gotten away from is the rehabilitation. It is to send you to prison, not, yes, it's a punishment for what you did, but it is also to reform you, because like you said, at some point in time, they're going to be back on the street. So it is to reform you so that you can be a viable citizen. It is to reform you so that you don't get into the things that put you there.
Yep.
Because sometimes, some first-timers, it's a mistake. But the fact of the matter is that I think we've gotten away from that real, what you just said, it is to rehabilitate so that you can become a formidable citizen within the community, within the status quo. And you hit it right on the head. And I think that's what we've gotten away from. Oh, yeah, we're going to send Roy McAllister away to prison, and now he's gone. Well, what about when Roy McAllister comes back home? Right. And I think you hit it right on the head. I just had to say that, because we've gotten away from that.
But you're so correct, Roy, because that's the one thing that when people do get out, they, as you said, they have to be integrated into their,
yes, sir,
not just in the workplace, but also in their families.
Yes, sir.
Because
yes, sir,
when you have a situation with somebody that may have committed a crime against one of their family members, they're still going to come out. And when they get out, what happens?
Yes,
sir,
sir,
at that point? And you as a prosecutor, you can look in that courtroom and you see families that are separated.
Yes, sir.
Because of things that happen. Mother, father, sister, brother, and crimes committed upon other family members. And you got to look out there and see the family and see them torn between somebody doing this to a grandparent. When you see these cases where you see a person that killed their father or killed a grandparent, you're in that courtroom right there with them, and now that person eventually is going to get out, depending on what the nature of the crime was. Could have been embezzlement, a number of things.
Yeah.
But if that person does get out, what do you see in terms of say, because those things happen to everybody.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And we talk about homelessness. You mentioned about that earlier, And there was the situation, you know, that happened where they're not going to press charges against the young lady that lost her 2 children in the, you know, in the casino parking lot.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I know there's a lot of heart-wrenching stories that you and your other prosecutors have to, you know, have to work with. But is there anything else that you think that you would like to see done? Any other reforms, as Roy was saying, to make certain that somebody, the first time you go in, you may have done something where you, let's say, you may have hit someone. I mean, it could have been some kind of domestic situation like that. But you get out, and then you can't get a job, and you're frustrated. And the reason why somebody may be in there is because of the fact that they couldn't get a job at somebody else's, you know, request to get a job. They get frustrated, may take it out on whoever it was that said something to them. They get arrested, they go to jail. They get out. There are programs I know in a lot of places where they get you into skilled trades. They give you an opportunity to go. And it's not just doing some of the menial tasks that they may be doing while they're incarcerated, but to actually be able to gain an opportunity to go and get a decent paying job. That's the one thing that I have to really give you credit to make certain about that recidivism, because you don't want that to happen, but you want to make certain that somebody's going to have a viable life once they get out.
Yeah. You know, and I mentioned diversion programs, right? Which allow people to avoid that criminal record in the first place. This conversation allows me to make a plug for funding reentry work, which is services that are available during the initial time that somebody is released from prison, especially if they've served a long time. You mentioned a lot of the stuff that people may be facing, Darwin. You mentioned, I mean, reintegrating in the family, right, everything like that. But I've talked to some folks that have returned home after lengthy prison sentences, and they say some of the biggest challenge they have is just a sense of ostracization because the world has changed so much since they've been behind bars. Remember, I talked to one person, you know, he was in since the 80s, right? And he said, when I came out, I just felt like it was a totally different world. I didn't know how to pump gas at a gas station because when I went in, and I don't even remember that, I'm 42 years old. Like, I've always paid with a credit card at the gas station. But he just didn't understand, like, everybody now pays with credit card. When he went inside, that wasn't an option. And he just felt like everybody's looking at me, everybody's staring at me, I don't belong here. And it's so important to have the workforce development, right? And have potential, like, inside, and then job placement once you get home, stable housing, but also, importantly, peer mentorship. Mentorship from folks who have gone through this before, because I can't sit up there and pretend that I know what it's like or can even anticipate what it's like not to know how to pump gas at a gas station. You told me that story, I was like, that's something I never would have thought of because it's so second nature to us. We're all on our phones all the time, right? And if you're somebody that served a lengthy prison sentence, like from the 90s, right? I remember the 90s dial-up internet, right? Like, think about how much things have changed since then and just how integrated it is into daily life. So funding those programs, funding like peer mentorship, workforce opportunities, and housing for returning citizens is really important, especially because what we know statistically is the first 6 months after you're released from prison is the most, you're most at risk of committing a new offense. And if we can get people that have returned home through that period, it's an investment that pays off because there's less likely to be a crime that happens in the future.
Well, you know, we've got to wrap this segment up. We definitely hope that your experience here at Watkins Broadcasting at WHPR has been a memorable one for you. I know you can look around this room and see all of the people that, you know, that have been here, that have done things, you know, as far as say here at WHPR. But we definitely want you to support black media. We definitely want you to support us here, you know, and we definitely want you to make certain that you are no stranger to us here at WHPR TV. So again, on behalf of Watkins Broadcasting, we appreciate you coming on the show. We hope that this is the first of many.
As do I.
Times that you will come on the show with us. But again, we have been talking with Washtenaw County Prosecutor Elie Savitt, candidate for Attorney General for the state of Michigan. We've been joined by the Honorable Alexis Ramsey, the Honorable Roy McAllister Jr., and just want to thank you on behalf of Watkins Broadcasting I'm your host for Truth to Power, Darwin Griffin, and please have a safe weekend and stay warm.